He opens his eyes and recognizes nothing. Not the sky, not the ground, not even his own hands. The last thing he remembers is a frayed cable on the 12th floor. 4 seconds of free fall, a familiar sound. And now dirt and 2 suns, white, bright, and the second, dim, reddish, like an inflamed eye on the edge of the horizon. Who threw him into this world? He sits down and looks at his hands. Someone else's hands. Soft, dirty, without a single callus. No scars from the coolant. No motor oil under his fingernails. 11 years have been erased along with his former body. He clenches his fingers into a fist, unclenches them. They work. Weakly, but they work. All around, knee-high brown grass. No roads, no poles, just a thin wisp of smoke to the northeast. He stands up. He staggers. His head is spinning. His stomach is growling with hunger. Someone lived in this body before him and lived a miserable life. Bones protrude through the skin on his wrists. His ribs are easily felt. His clothes hang in tatters, a shirt full of holes, pants tied with a rope instead of a belt. No shoes, no knife, not a penny. He stands in the middle of a foreign world in a foreign body without a single resource. And then the map flashes to life. It lights up right before his eyes, transparent, glowing like a monitor. He recoils. The map floats after him, hangs in the air at arm's length. He runs his hand through it. Only light, but light carrying information. The map shows an entire continent. Mountains to the west, a coastline to the east. Rivers, lakes, forests as green patches. And markers, bright, pulsating, scattered across the land. The first marker is on the river east of the center. Blue. Next to it is a symbol he doesn't recognize at first. Then it clicks. Water. Flood. And a number. 8 months. He blinks. Looks again. 8 months until the flood in this place. The second marker is further south. Brown. Earthquake. 14 months. The third, even further south. Yellow. Drought. 2 years. Further on, the markers come more frequently. Orange. Red. Each one larger than the last, and the intervals between them are shrinking. He flips through the map to the end. 7 years. The last mark is in the very heart of the continent. A red dot. No caption. No symbol. No explanation. It pulses slowly and heavily, like a massive heartbeat. And beyond it, the map ends. Emptiness. He stands barefoot on a foreign plain and looks at the end of the world. 7 years. A chain of markers with increasing intensity. The last dot without a single word. And he is the only one who sees it. The map is silent. It offers no advice. It explains not who brought him here or who gave him this knowledge. Dry data, coordinates, and dates. What to do with them? Decide for yourself. He closes his eyes, opens them. The map is still there. He turns his head. The map turns with him. He tries to brush it away with a gesture. No use. It stuck to him like a shadow. He looks at the wisp of smoke in the northeast. Smoke means fire. Fire means people. People he doesn't know. A language he doesn't know. A world he doesn't know. But 8 months before the first strike, standing still isn't an option. He walks. His bare feet sink into the ground. The grass cuts into his ankles. His body holds up, but every 200 steps he freezes and waits for the dizziness to pass. He wanders for hours, maybe 3. There are no clocks, and you can't trust the suns. The white one creeps westward, the red one barely drags southward. Shadows fall in pairs and confuse him. And then, from the top of a gentle hill, a view opens up. A village. 40 houses, maybe fewer. Mud brick walls, thatched roofs, cattle pens, vegetable gardens behind low fences, people moving between the houses, women at the well, children on the road, a man repairing a cart by the house at the far end. He stopped at the top of the hill and looked down. Then he looked at the map. The village stood on a hill, the only hill on the entire plain within sight. The first flood mark was to the east and lower down. The river that would burst its banks in 8 months would flow past this hill. The water would flood the plain, but wouldn't reach the top. This village would survive, not because it was special, but because it was in the right place. He walked down toward the village. A boy of about 10 was the first to spot him. The boy froze in the middle of the road and stared at him as if he were a ghost. Then he turned and ran toward the houses. A minute later, 3 men came out onto the road, strong, tanned, with wary expressions. One was holding something that looked like a hoe. They started talking. He didn't understand a word. The language was unfamiliar. Not a single root. Not a single sound that could be linked to anything known. He stood before them, dirty and barefoot in torn clothes, with a foreign face, and he remained silent, because speaking was useless. One of the men stepped closer, said something sharp, pointed his hand to the side. "Get out. Go back where you came from." The gesture is understood in any language. He didn't leave. He pointed to the ground beneath his feet. Then he pointed to the sky. Then he cupped his hands together and spread them apart. Water. He was trying to explain with gestures. Big water. Lots of water. It's coming. The men exchanged glances. The one with the hoe said something to the others. They laughed. One came over and shoved him in the chest. He fell. He got up. They shoved him again. He got up again. The third time they didn't shove him. They hit him in the face. Not with a fist, with an open palm, like you'd hit a pesky dog. He fell to his knees. His mouth tasted salty. He spat and stood up. The men looked at him without malice, more like with irritation. A vagrant had come to spout nonsense, business as usual. They pointed him toward the road. He looked at them. Then he looked at the village. Then he looked at the map that only he could see. 8 months. In 8 months, the river would flood the entire eastern valley. Hundreds of people would lose their homes. Thousands would be left without food. And they would all go somewhere. Some of them would come here, to this hill, to this village, because there was nowhere else to go. And this village of 40 houses wasn't ready to take in even 20 extra mouths to feed, let alone hundreds. He had to stay, at any cost. He looked around. By the house at the edge of the village stood a cart with a broken wheel, the very one the man had been repairing. He walked over to the cart. The men behind him spoke louder. Someone grabbed his shoulder. He shook off the hand and crouched down next to the wheel. The axle was bent, not broken, bent. He'd seen this 100 times. Not on carts, of course, on the frames of outdoor air conditioning units, on brackets, on mounting rails. The principle was the same. The metal was deformed, but intact. He needed a fulcrum and a lever. He looked around. A rock, a suitable rock by the fence, and a stick, a piece of a pole from the pen. He picked up the rock, placed it under the axle. He inserted the pole. He pushed down. The axle gave way on the first try. Not perfect, but good enough. The wheel settled back into the groove. The man who had been repairing the cart stood nearby and said nothing. He looked at the wheel, then at the stranger, then back at the wheel. The others fell silent too. It wasn't a victory. It was a moment of attention. A single repaired axle is worth nothing, but it's worth more than words in a language no one understands. He straightened up, pointed at himself, then pointed at the ground. "I'm staying here." A simple gesture. The man with the hoe looked at the owner of the cart. The man shrugged. Not approval, more like indifference. "Do whatever you want, just don't get in the way." They didn't give him a home. They didn't give him food. They didn't even give him a blanket. He found a spot under the eaves of a barn on the edge of the village. He sat down on the ground, leaned his back against the mud brick wall, and closed his eyes. The map glowed even through his eyelids. 8 months until the flood. He's alone, without a language, without tools, without a single ally, with a body that can barely stand on its own 2 feet, and with a doomsday schedule that no one but him can see. For 11 years, he's been going out on calls that no one else wanted to take. In the heat, up on the roof, without thanks. He's no hero, no prophet, no chosen warrior. He's an air conditioning technician who died because of a frayed cable and woke up in a world that will soon cease to exist. And the only thing he knows how to do about the problem is to work. Tomorrow, he'll start digging. A channel from the river to the eastern slope of the hill. A water diversion. Primitive, but functional. He'll find a shovel, or make one. He didn't know yet that he'd be digging alone. Every day, from dawn till dusk. 3 months. That he'd be beaten twice more. That they would laugh at him every morning when he came out with his homemade shovel. That the first person to come help him would do so not out of faith, but out of pity. But all that would come later. Right now he was sitting under the shed's awning in a village on the edge of a foreign world, listening to the red sun humming on the horizon and counting the days until the water. He woke up from the cold. The red sun had risen. The white barely appeared above the line of the horizon. My body was as if it had been through millstones. Every joint, every muscle. My back is stiff from the night on the ground. He sat and a few seconds just breathed. The map hung in front of my eyes. Nothing had his first mark. Blue. 8 months. No. Already 7 months and 20 days. The timer was ticking. He got up and went to look at a shovel. In village, in 40 houses, there be at least there at shovel. He walked 3 yards. At the first at it, a dog the size of the calf. Yellow eyes and hair on end. He backed away. At the second courtyard, a woman splashed at him at his a bucket of lef and slammed the gate. On the third, old man was on doorstep and peeling a root vegetable with a knife. The old man looked at him for a long time and without expression. How they look at a fly that has on table. He gestured with gestures. Dig. Dirt. Shovel. The old man nothing did answered and turned to his root vegetable. The shovels him did. He stood there for a minute in the middle of the road. Then he toward Edge Grove, toward the western slope of the hill. I found a suitable tree, a branch about a wrist, and as at a person's a person. He broke it. It worked. The body was too weak. He braced his foot against trunk and leaned with his world. The branch cracked and broke off. He sat on the ground and began till the end with a stone. He crept and scraped. He struck and scraped. After an at, he something in between a paddle and a stick. Flat end, blunt, rough. This is shovel. That an insult. Shovels. But it tool. It returned to eastern slope of the hill and began dig. The first blow into the med echoed with pain in palms. The second peeled the skin. The third left a bloody mark on the shaft. The ground here was compact, clay mixed with stones. Every bayonet yielded a handful of soil. After an hour, he had a med that in 3 steps and depth a med a palm. This is enough even to divert streams, and he needs divert the river. He believed in his pain. The channel must go from the eastern slope of the med toward the lowlands to the southeast. 3 kilometers at a minimum. The width, 1.5 meters. Depth, 1 meter. That is 4 and end 1,000 cubic meters of soil. With stick, with hands. For 7 and end a months. He calculated again. Million? Even if dig through 12 hours a day and take out 1 cubic meter per hour is 4 and 1,000 hours, 375 days. More a year. For him has years. He is and a months. 225 days. Math didn't add up. He needed help. Or real tools. Or and that and the other. But him doesn't either of nor the other. And he continued digging. That's that standing and count is work. Work is when you move the earth. By noon, the white sun was at its zenith. The heat was like a wet blanket. He didn't eat from yesterday. I drunk since this morning. My head was spinning. My hands were shaking. A furrow for half a day had grown by 12 steps. He sat on edge, his pathetic groove, and looked toward east. Somewhere there, beyond the horizon, flows river, calm and wide. Across 7 and a months, she will swell from the rain and gush over the banks. The wave will take through the valley and sweep everything onto its path. Villages, fields, people, livestock. He knows it. He sees it on the map. And the only thing he can do is sit in the day with a stick in tattered hands. From the village came children, 5 of them. The oldest is 12, the youngest years 6. They got in a line at edge the day and looked at it as a day A. One pointed and said something. The rest laughed. He didn't pay it. He's certainly on. The children didn't leave. After half an hour, the eldest picked up a stone and threw it. It hit in the back. Not hard, but for sure. The rest followed suit. The stones were small. It's more disappointing than painful. He didn't stop. He turned around. He kept driving the stick into the clay and turned the soil. The children threw rocks for 10-10, then got bored and they left. He stayed alone. By evening, a furrow stretched to 30 steps, about 20 meters. The depth is still laughable, but the line is visible. The direction is set. He stuck a stick into ground and looked at his hands. My palms were worn to the bone. 4 bloody blisters burst and turned into open wounds. Fingers did bend. He went to the well in center the village. To draw water, wash your hands. At well stood that woman with the slop. She saw him and took a step back. He pointed toward the well, then pointed at his hands, blood and dirt. The woman looked at his palms. Her did change. She walked to a side. It helped. I chased it away. I just went away. He lowered the bucket into well. He pulled it out, reached my hands into the water. The was so that he clenched his and stopped breathe for a few seconds. Then it easier. He got from that same bucket. The water was clear and ice cold, the best thing he has in his life. He returned the bucket to its one and went back to his shed. On the way, I noticed that a man with a repaired cart is standing by his fence and looks at it. Not hostile, not friendly, just stares. Just that strange animal that has wandered into the bung and doesn't leave. He lay under the canopy. The glowed in the dark. He studied it until she her. I enlarged the areas. I examined the marks. Tried to understand the logic. Flood in the east. Earthquake in the south. Drought in the center. 3 blows in 2 years. Then another 4 for the next 5 years. Each stronger than the previous one. Each closer to center of the continent. As if something is squeezing a ring. He looked at the village. Lower cry. 40 houses on the hill. 200 people who don't know that in 8 months to them will water. And 14 months, the land under our will to shake. But not here. The earthquake will know the southern cities. And will refugees. Refugees. Those who survive. This village stands at crossroads, not roads. Disasters. Everything that will be destroyed around will push people upward, to the only place that will stand. He realized this for first day when I showed the map. Hill won't flood. The hill will not shake. The hill stands on rocky foundation. It felt it by the density of when I was digging. Clay on top, but under it is solid, stable. This village will survive not because that it's strong, but because everything around her will collapse, and he must prepare. The second day began just out. Dawn, cold, pain in my hands. He wrapped his palms strips of clay torn from the hem of the shirt. He went to dig. The stick was begun splitting at the end. He found a stone, sharper. He put the tip again. It turned out worse than yesterday. But he dug. The third day, fourth, fifth. Every morning he got up before daybreak sunrise. He walked toward the slope. I was digging toward dark. I was on my way back to the shed. I fell asleep. I woke up. I repeated it. The furrow grew slowly, by 15 steps a day, sometimes up to 20 if the ground was softer. The depth increased even slowly. Toward the end the first week, the channel stretched to 100 steps and was deep, up knee-deep. That, nothing. A drop in the sea. But the line on the ground was already visible from the top of the hill. The villagers saw it. Every day, one of them would stand at the edge and watch as the stranger poked at the ground with a stick. No one approached. No one asked. They watched and walked away. On the 6th day, a man came with a hoe, the very same one who had struck him in the face on the first day. He stood at the edge of the furrow and looked down for a long time. Then he said something. His voice was different. Not angry, more puzzled. He looked up at the man, pointed at the furrow, then pointed in a direction, toward the east, toward the river. Then he cupped his hands again and spread them apart. Water, a lot of water. The man shook his head. He turned and walked away. But he didn't laugh. It was more than he could have expected. On the 8th day, the stick broke. It snapped in half when it hit a rock. He stood over the two pieces and looked at them. Then he sat down on the ground and stayed there for 10 minutes. Not from fatigue, from anger. The quiet, mechanical anger of a man whose tool had broken yet again in the middle of a job. 11 years on the job. 1 in 3 with equipment breaking down right on the spot. A compressor died on the roof in 40-degree heat. A drill bit seized up halfway through an installation. A ladder buckled under the weight. Same thing every time. You stand there and think. Then you make do with what you have. He went into the grove, found a new branch. Thicker. But shaping it with a stone would mean wasting half a day. He returned to the village. He approached the house of a man with a cart. The man was sitting on the porch, eating something from a bowl. He pointed to the shed behind the house. Then he made a gesture. Chop. An axe. The man chewed and looked at him, silently, for a long time. Then he stood up, went into the shed, brought out an axe, an old one, rusty, with a chipped blade. He held out the handle. He took the axe, gestured that he'd return it. The man waved his hand. Do what you want. The first tool, not a gift, not help, more like a gesture of weary indifference. Take it and leave me alone. But that was enough. He whittled down a new branch in an hour instead of 4. The end turned out smoother and sharper. The shovel was still pathetic, but the axe gave him something else. He began chopping thin trunks in the grove. He whittled them down and drove them into the edges of the furrow, a framework, reinforcing the canal walls. The clay crumbled without support. Every rain washed away what he dug up in a day. With stakes along the edges, the walls held. It wasn't engineering. It was desperation. But desperation that works counts too. By the end of the 2nd week, he began to understand individual words, not from conversations, from context. The woman at the well said the same word every time she drew water. He realized that this word meant water, or well, or both. The children shouted one word as they ran toward their homes. He realized that it meant to eat, or dinner. The old man at the 3rd house said the same phrase every morning when he stepped out onto the porch. He decided it was something like a curse about the weather. The language seeped into him, drop by drop, slowly and painfully, but it seeped in. On the 15th day, something happened he hadn't expected. He was digging at the far end of the furrow, about 150 meters from the village. It was work he was used to, a strike, a lever, a turn, a toss, a rhythm he could keep up for hours without thinking. and then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around. A woman. Not the one with the slop, another one. Young, thin, with a tired face and hands that had seen a lot of work. She stood at the edge of the furrow and looked down. She held a bowl in her hands. She set the bowl on the ground. Porridge, gray and thick. No spoon. She pointed at the bowl. Then she pointed at him. Eat. He looked at her. She was already walking away, without looking back. He sat down next to the bowl. He scooped up the porridge with his hands. It was warm and tasteless. He ate it all in a minute. It was his first meal in 2 days. Before that, he had been eating whatever he could find. Roots, berries by the stream behind the grove, some kind of stems that were chewable, enough to keep from dying, not enough to work 12-hour shifts. The porridge changed things, not drastically, but enough. The next morning, the bowl was in the same spot, at the edge of the furrow, still warm. He didn't see who had brought it, but he guessed. She brought porridge every morning, 15 days in a row, not a single word, no explanations, no attempt to speak, just a bowl at the edge of the ditch. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she was doing it. Maybe pity, maybe curiosity, maybe something else. He didn't ask. He ate and dug. By the end of the 3rd week, the trench stretched 400 paces. The depth at the starting point reached his waist. The walls were reinforced with stakes. The bottom was packed down. This was no longer a scratch on the ground. It was the beginning of a canal. An ugly one. A crooked one. Too shallow. But real. And the village began to notice it. Not to approve. To notice. A man with a hoe now walked by every evening. He stopped. He looked. He said nothing. He walked away. An old man with a root vegetable once made it to the far end of the trench. He stood there. He touched the wall with his foot. He walked back. The children stopped throwing stones. Now they sat on the edge and watched, sometimes for hours. He paid no attention to them. He counted the days. 7 months and 8 days until the flood. The furrow was 400 paces long. He needed 3,000. The math still didn't add up. He needed help, and he didn't know how to get it. 20th, 22nd day, he broke the second cuttings. It cracked, not at end and in the middle. The crack ran along the grain, and the stick split in two like a bone. He stood at waist in a ditch and held 2 useless fragments. My hands were from exhaustion. Calluses on palms have hardened and cracked. Blood was already no flowing. The skin had into something resembling a bark. He threw away the debris. He out-ditch. He walked into grove. I cut down a branch with an axe. I whittled it down. I went back. Continued. That was his ritual. A breakdown. Pause. Replacement. Work. 11 years of on-call taught him one thing. Tools break all the time. The tools about whether it made or not. The tools that how much minutes you lost on the replacement. It fit in 40. Channel to this day stretched for 520 steps. Just more 350 meters. The depth at first meters reached to waist. Further, it was shallower. The last 50 meters were just a breeze. He worked from the village to east. Every day, he moved 15 steps forward and returned to deepen that had dug. 2 directions at once. Forward and down. Forward and down. He checked with the map every morning. Flood stood in place. The blue dot pulsed steady and calmly. The timer was ticking. 7 months and 1 day. He was the route of water based the terrain. The map showed elevations, not numbers, by color. Dark is low. Light is high. The river will across the valley and flow toward the west. The main flow will pass south of the hill, but the arm will hit toward the eastern slope. Not the V of water, perhaps a tenth of it, but a tenth of the river is wall of 2 meters. The channel must intercept this hose and take him down toward southeast. There is a depression, a natural reservoir. If the canal reaches to it, the water will go into it as into a pit. If can't reach, the water overflows over and hit the slope, and wash everything that it is, including the houses of the village. He believed in his head, 800 meters to the valley. He walked 350. There are 450, 7 months, 210 days, 7 meters per a day. If he dig only straight and not dig deeper. But without depth, the channel is useless, so need to faster, or need more hands. At 24th day, he tried to speak. Not with men, with a woman who brought porridge. She came in the morning as usual. She set a bowl on edge the furrow. He said a word, that very one overheard by the well. Water. It stopped. She turned around. She looked at him. He pointed toward east. Then he repeated the word, then spread his arms. A large water. She looked at him for seconds. Then she said 2 words, slowly, as they say to a child or to a fool. He didn't understand. She repeated. He caught the first word, something similar to that the old man said every morning. He decided that this word doesn't know, or nonsense, or and that and the other. She left. But the morning the bowl stood in its place. It was not conversation. It was an attempt, the first of many. He began collect words like stones for a wall, one by one, every day. Water, earth, yes, no, house, hill, morning. He listened to the villagers as walked by. I remembered the sounds. I tied them to actions. A woman calls the child. The sound is tied to the name. A man shouts at the dog. The sound tied to a command. The salesman arrived in A and talked with 3 men at once. Too fast. He caught only one word. Road, or city, or and that and the other. On the 27th day, he for the first time put together a phrase. 3 words. Water. It will come. Big. He said this to the bull with a hoe, who was standing at edge of the canal and looked down. The man stared at him. No, because that he understood, but because that a stranger for the first time discovered his mouth, and from it something similar, a human speech, he repeated, Water will come, a lot. The man replied with a long sentence from which he could understand it all, but that was questioning. When, or why, or where, you know? He showed toward east, toward river, which does visible beyond the horizon, then showed at sky, then pointed at the channel. The man shook his head and walked away, but more slowly than usual, and at the fence turned around. On 30th day it writ. The first heavy rain in the quince its appearance. Until that, there were light, drizzly mornings that ended in an hour. This rain came from the north. A dark wall of clouds covered the quinns in half an hour. The wind blasted the quinns the hill so that the trees in the quinns grove bent to the ground, and it started pouring. He stood in the canal when the quinns the downpour. Water gushed down of the quinns and flowed down, along the path of resistance, along its channel. He looked as the water filled the furrow, first the bottom, then up the ankle, then on the knee. The stream gained speed. The walls that he reinforced with stakes held firm. There where pegs were was the floated away. Whole chunks of the wall crumbled into water and turned into sludge. He jumped out from the Rothe and ran along it toward the upper edge. The water flowed down the channel smoothly. There where he directed, to southeast, toward the lowlands. The canal was working. Not fully, not at full power. Shallow sections shimmered over the edge. Unreinforced walls were crumbling. But main flow flowed along the riverbed. It stood in the downpour and looked at it. The rain poured on my face and shoulders. My clothes got in seconds. Couldn't. That's that. The channel was working. Dirty, ugly, crooked, shallow canal, dug with a stick and bare hands over 30 days. It worked. The rain fell for 4 hours. When it stopped, half of the unfortified section had been destroyed. 60 meters of work washed away. The walls collapsed. The bottom silted up. But the fortified section stood. The stakes held the walls. The compacted bottom held firm. 300 meters of the canal passed the first test. And the whole village saw it. Because the rain had driven everyone indoors, and the only entertainment was looking out the windows. And outside the windows, a stranger stood knee-deep in the stream, watching as his ditch swallowed the water. On the 31st day, a man with a cart came to the canal. The very same one who had given him the axe. He brought a shovel, a real one. A wooden blade with an iron edge on a wooden handle. Rough, heavy, but a real shovel. He set it down at the edge of the canal. He said one word. He didn't understand the word, but he understood the gesture. Take it. He took the shovel. He thrust it into the ground. The first dig went a hand's breadth deep, 3 times deeper than with the stick. He looked at the man. The man was already walking away. The real shovel changed everything. Not the speed. The speed doubled, maybe tripled. But what changed most was the quality. Smooth walls, a smooth bottom, clean corners. Every meter dug with the shovel was worth 5 meters dug with the stick. He restored the damaged section in 3 days. It would have taken 10 with the stick. The furrow ceased to be a scratch. It became a channel. Narrow, not deep enough for a real flood, but a channel. On the 35th day, a second man arrived. Not with a shovel, with his bare hands. A young guy, about 17, skinny as a rake. He silently jumped into the channel and began scooping out the earth with his hands. No tools, no words. He just started working. He looked at the guy. The guy didn't look at him. He shoveled dirt, threw it onto the bank, shoveled again. He didn't ask why. He hadn't explained why when he started either. They worked side by side until evening, in silence. The guy dug slower and less efficiently, but he dug. 2 people in the canal meant twice as much dirt cleared in a day, even if the second one was working at half strength. On the 37th day, the guy came back, and he brought another one with him, a boy of about 14, also without tools, also silent. 3 in the ditch. On the 39th day, there were 4 of them. The 4th was an old man, not the one with the root vegetable, another one, stooped and silent. He came with something resembling a hoe. He stood at the far end and began chipping away at the clay, slowly, with pauses, but methodically. None of them spoke to him. No one asked why the ditch. No one said they believed in the flood. They just came and started working. He thought about it that evening under the shed. Why? Rain. The answer was in the rain. They saw how the water flowed through the ditch, not across the field, not down the road, through the ditch, right where he directed it. That wasn't proof of a flood. It was proof that the ditch worked. And a ditch that works is a useful thing, even if there's no flood at all. Diverting rainwater away from the village, protecting the vegetable gardens from erosion, drainage, practical benefits. They didn't come because they believed him. They came because they saw that it worked. And that's better than belief. Belief can crumble at a single doubt. Practical benefits are based on results. On the 42nd day, there were 7 of them. 2 new men arrived with their own tools, a shovel and something halfway between a pickaxe and a hoe. The channel grew, 40 meters a day. The depth in the main section reached chest height. The width was 1.5 meters. The walls were reinforced with stakes along their entire length. He divided up the work. 2 dug at the front edge. 2 were deepening the trench behind them. 2 were reinforcing the walls. 1 was hauling the dirt to the top. Rotation every 2 hours. It wasn't organization. It was common sense. That's how crews work on a construction site. That's how his crews worked when he was installing split-system air conditioners on building facades. 1 secures the bracket, the second hands the unit over, the third pulls the line. Everyone knows their place. Everyone sees what their neighbor is doing. He didn't give orders. He showed them. He'd stand in a section and work. Then he'd move on to the next one. People saw what he was doing and did the same. By the end of the 6th week, the trench stretched 900 meters, more than halfway to the basin. The depth in the main section is 1.5 meters. The width is 2. He widened it because 7 men in a narrow channel get in each other's way, and because the calculations showed that 1.5 meters wide wouldn't be enough for the volume of water he expected. He needs 3 meters, at least. The map showed 6 months and 15 days until the flood. The canal was half finished. There were 7 workers. There was still barely enough food. The woman with the porridge now brought a large pot, for everyone. Someone from the village tossed in some vegetables. Not much, but enough so the people in the canal wouldn't collapse from hunger. He sat on the edge of the canal in the evening and looked at his work. 900 meters of a muddy furrow cutting through the plain from the hill to the southeast. 7 people who would jump down again tomorrow morning and dig into the clay. The woman who sets the kettle on the edge every morning. The man who gave him an axe and then a shovel and never once asked why. The village didn't believe in the flood. The village believed in the canal. And for now, that was enough. 7:59. At 45th day, he woke up and couldn't straighten my back. He lay under the canopy and looked at the ceiling from straw. The body refused to obey. 6 weeks of daily work on 12 hours squeezed out this body everything that in it was. He lay there an hour, then rolled onto my side. I got all fours, stood up straight against the wall. My back cracked in 3 places. The pain went away, did completely, but enough to go. He went toward the canal. 6 were downstairs. They were working, without him. He stopped at edge and looked. A young guy who came first stood at the edge and dug. Nearby with him, a 14 years was shoveling the dirt. 2 men were deepening the middle section. The old man with a hoe was the wall on far end. The 6th carried soil up in a basket. They worked without it, without instructions, without supervision. Everyone knew his section and his task. He went into the canal. He shovel. I stood on my place. No one did, said. The work continued. That was the moment that he remembered. Not like an event, as a fact. The system works without it. 6 people who 6 weeks ago didn't know that a channel now they're digging it themselves. This means that he can do other things. He was until noon. Then he out the roan and walked toward the slope of the hill. He put this for weeks. Now it's time. The north slope was poems and covered with crip. Behind it stretched lowland that into a marshy floodplain. The stream wound through it, thin, murky snake, and slipped somewhere toward west. He looked at the map. The flood will hit from the east. The channel will carry away the main flow to southeast. But this is the first strike. The second blow will come in 14 months. An earthquake in south. It won't reach the hill. The map showed the epicenter in 300 kilometers further south. But the map showed and something else. After the earthquake in south, a mark appeared further west. Landslide. Mountain range to west is unstable. Shaking in south will trigger a chain reaction. The landslide will block one of western rivers. The water will stop flow. The stream to the northern slope is fed from that same system. Via 2 months after the Oni, the stream will dry up. The only source of rosti for the village other than a well. And well is the back. They're 200 people. For 200 people, he can find manages. But after the flood, refugees. Refugees. Map did say how many. He estimated himself, Eastern Valley, 5 villages in the flood zone, maybe 6. The population of each of 100 to 400 people. Even if half-half and only a third of them will the Oni, the Hildas, from 100 to 400 extra mouths. One well won't hold out. It needs a second one, and a third, and a supply of water. He stood on northern slope and thought, not about digging Oni dig or not to dig, to that, where to dig. A villa is not a canal. A canal runs horizontally. The villa runs vertical, down, in blind. He doesn't know how depth here the water is. The map shows the surface, not the interior. He knew one thing. The hill stands on rocky foundation. It felt the stone under the clay when I was the canal. The rock began at a depth 1.5 meters. To break the rock with a wooden shovel and a hoe is impossible. He needs other tools, or a different place. He went from to the floodplain. The ground here was softer, black soil, peat, moist and loose. I dug with a shovel. On the bayonet went without resistance. 2 bayonets, 3. On the 4th, a stream water, muddy and brown. Groundwater near to surface. It could dig a well here. But here is a floodplain, a lowland. At flood this place will be first. The well in the floodplain is useless after flood. Dirty river water mixes with ground and poison everything. He needs a well on the hill. Where's the rock? He returned to the top and sat next well. A village well was old. The walls were stone. The depth meters, maybe 10. Someone once chiseled a hole and reached to aquifer. That means it possible, but how? He peered inside. The walls were roughly blocks. The gaps between them are filled with clay. On bottom glistened water. He looked at the stones more closely. Traces on them, chisel marks, a wedge. Someone was this rock with a tool, slowly, block by block. He had a chisel, or something like chisel, an iron and heavy stone. He went to the blacksmith. The blacksmith lived in western edge of the village, the only house with stone walls, and with a canopy under which stood an anvil, small, about a tree stump, bellows. Gorn made fired clay. The blacksmith was a man with scorched forearms and a beard. He sat on doorstep and sharpened the blade of the sickle. He approached. The blacksmith looked at him, up. He said something. His was neutral, not friendly, and not hostile. He gestured with gestures. His fist on his palm, a stone, then pointed down. Dig. Then pointed at the well in center the village. Water. Chisel the stone to dig a well. The blacksmith was watching at his gestures, then said one word. He recognized it. That word he had many times. Why? Or why? He answered with 3 words that he knew. Water. A lot. People. Kuznets squinted, then asked something long. He didn't understand the of it. He only 2 words. Where from? And no. Where he knows. He froze. That was the first time that someone asked him this question directly. He smiled. He twisted his finger at his temple. He asked seriously, where do know that there are water and that people? He could answer. He could for words. And even if there were, he not could tell the truth. I see a card that hangs in front my eyes and shows future disasters. His would have been with stones, or burned, or and that and the other. He showed at sky, then at the ground, then to his head. I know. It's just no. The blacksmith looked at him for a long time. 20, 30, then got up. He went to the workshop. I went with 2 iron wedges. Each was a palm, thick, heavy, with pointed tips. I put them on the anvil. He said one word. Take it. He took the wedges, heavy in hand. Real steel. The first real hardware that he held in this world. He looked at the blacksmith. The knee had returned to sickle. The conversation is over. He left with 2 wedges and a head full of questions. The blacksmith gave him the tools, not out of faith, not for practical use, for some other reason. Maybe out of curiosity. Maybe he was just interested in seeing how a stranger would chisel away at the rock. He chose a spot for the well on the southeast slope of the hill. Not at the top where the houses stand, lower down, but above the flood level. Far enough from the village well so as not to cross the aquifer. Close enough so as not to have to haul water halfway across the village. He began digging on the 47th day. The first 1.5 meters took 2 days. Clay. The shovel managed. On the 3rd day, the shovel struck stone. The sound was dry and short, like a knock on a door that won't open. Rock. He took out a wedge, found a crack in the stone, inserted it, struck it from above with a stone hammer. The wedge went in a finger's width. Another blow. Another finger's width. Another. A chip. A fist-sized chunk of rock flew off the mass. He picked it up and threw it up. The first piece. He needed several thousand of them. He chiseled at the rock for 3 hours a day. The rest of the time he worked on the canal. Morning on the canal. Day on the canal. Evening at the well. Every evening he went down into the pit and tapped the rock with the wedge. The sound carried through the village in the evening silence. Tap, tap, tap. Steady and endless. After a week, he had dug 30 centimeters below the rock line. In 2 weeks, 70. The rock was uneven. In some places it cracked and gave way in large chunks. In others it stood as a monolith, and the wedge slid across it, leaving white scratches. He changed his striking points. He looked for weak spots. He struck at an angle. He wedged the cracks with wooden pegs that swelled with water and tore the stone from the inside. He didn't know this technique. He came up with this technique out of desperation. He drove a peg into the crack. He splashed water on it. He went to sleep. In the morning, the crack had widened by 2 fingers. The wood swelled and pried the stone apart like pliers. He began using this method every evening. He hammered in pegs. He poured water over them. He left them overnight. In the morning, he knocked out the split pieces. His pace doubled. Meanwhile, at the canal, what he had been waiting for and fearing happened. On the 52nd day, there were 12 workers, then 15. By the 60th day, 23 people were working on the canal, almost 1 in 10 villagers. They didn't all come at once, 2 or 3 at a time. Some worked a full day. Others came for a couple of hours between their other tasks. But the canal grew, 60 meters a day. The walls were reinforced. The bottom was compacted. The quality improved because among the new workers were people who knew how to work with the earth. Farmers. They had been digging their whole lives. Their furrows were smoother than his. Their walls didn't crumble. He learned from them, just as they learned from him. He set the direction and depth. The quality of the work was theirs. By the 70th day, the canal had reached 1,400 meters, 400 meters to the depression. The depth in the main section was 2 meters. The width was 3. The walls were reinforced along their entire length, with stakes and woven willow shields. One of the farmers had suggested this idea. Willow rods woven into shields and dug in along the walls. Flexible. Strong. They hold the soil better than single stakes. He accepted the idea immediately. He accepted any idea that worked better than his own. That, too, was a habit from his past life. On a construction site, there is no copyright. There is a method that works and a method that doesn't. The canal became a communal effort, not his, everyone's. And that was right. On the 73rd day, the well yielded water. He stood at the bottom of a 4-meter deep pit, 2 meters of clay and 2 meters of rock. The wedge struck another crack and water gushed out. Not in a jet, a slow, steady stream. Cold, clean. He cupped his hands and scooped up a handful, tasted it. No aftertaste, no murkiness. Clean groundwater from beneath the rock. He stood ankle deep in the water at the bottom of the pit he had been chiseling away at for 26 days. He looked up at the square of sky above his head. 2 suns, white and red. And he thought about how in 5 months people would come here. Lots of people. Hungry, wet, having lost everything. And he would give them water. From the well he had chiseled out of the rock with 2 iron wedges and wooden pegs. He climbed out of the pit. His hands were scraped and bruised from the blows. His back wouldn't straighten. His knees were shaking. He sat down on the edge and stayed there for 10 minutes. Then he stood up and went to the blacksmith. The blacksmith was sitting in the same spot. He was shaping another sickle. He walked over. He said 3 words. Water. There is. Down there. The blacksmith looked at him, at his hands, at the bruises and scrapes, at the clay in his hair and on his face. Then he nodded. With a single, short movement, he turned and walked back. Behind him, the blacksmith stood up and went to the well, to look. In the evening, he lay under the canopy. The map showed 5 months and 2 days until the flood. The canal is 1,400 meters long. The second well is ready. 23 people work every day. A woman cooks for everyone. The blacksmith knows him by sight. The village still doesn't believe in the flood. But the village is already working to save itself from it. Not because they believe, but because the canal diverts water from the vegetable gardens, and the new well will provide water when the old one runs dry during a drought. Practical benefit. The only language people who don't see the map understand. In the 78th day, the channel reached to the hollow. 800 meters. The last bayonet went into soft soil of the Bleck, and from shovel emerged dark water. Swampy. Stagnant. But it meant that the level of the grate was the level of the channel. The water will find down. On its own. Without pumps or without pressure. It stood at the edge of the Bleck and looked back. The strip of the grate stretched from it to the hill. Almost 2 kilometers of soil. A brown scar on green plain. 26 people stood along the canal. Someone sat on the edge and drank water. Someone else was digging deeper, reinforcing. But the front edge reached to the target. It did celebrate. Celebrating was nothing Chanel is to length but not in depth, and not by width. The first 400 meters from the hill he dug to 2.5 meters and extended to 3. The average section from 400 to 1,000 square meters smaller, 1.5 meters deep, 2.5 wide. The last 800 meters is a trench along belt. This is enough. If the water goes like as he expected, the ford of the river will strike in the eastern slope with a volume which will fill the channel in minutes. The first 400 meters will hold up. The middle section will be overflowing. Further, the water will overflow over the walls and flow across surface. Toward the hollow it reach, and half of the stream. The rest will flood the plain, and the lower houses. He needs deepen the entire to 2.5 meters. That is 400 meters of work. 5 months until the flood. No. 4 months and 20 days. He gathered people in edge the canal in the evening. For the first time, until that, he had turned to everyone I worked side by side. I showed them, I guided with gestures, but didn't speak. Now he stood in front of 26 people, and him had maybe 40 words in their language. He spoke slowly, every word separately. He accompanied with gestures. Channel, long, ready, but shallow. There will be a lot. He showed the level with his hands. Higher, head, the channel, shallow. The water is higher. You need deeper. Everywhere, deeper. He showed to middle section, then to the far section, then again a gesture of depth. Dig down. He looked at faces, 26 faces, tanned and dirty, tired. He didn't know what to expect. They came to dig a canal because that a canal is useful. Rainwater, water, drainage, practical tips. But now he said them that they want to deepen 1.5 kilometers of the canal because that will come water above, over. This is matter. That is about a catastrophe. A young guy who was first said something quickly. He got the gist of it. How much? How time? He showed with his fingers. 4 and 2. 4 months and 22 days. The guy exchanged a glance with the man next to him. The man shook his head. He said a few words. He didn't understand all, but caught one thing. Not enough. Time is short. He nodded. Yes, not much. That's why we need more people. He showed to the village, then pointed a gesture which meant a lot. We need more hands. Silence. Long. Then the with a hoe. He very who hit him in the face in the day. He spoke for a long time. He realized maybe a third, and that was enough. The man said that the village doesn't believes in a water. What do you think that stranger is crazy? That channel is useful for rain, and everything this acknowledge. But a large water that is over is a fairy tale, and no one will will thee and vegetable gardens for a fairy tale. He listened. He interrupt. He waited until the man finished, then said 4 words. Rain, the canal, worked, we saw. The man fell silent. He continued, slowly, 1 word. The water, then, held. High water will be. The canal is ready. We need to deeper. The man looked at him. Then the channel. Then again to it. Then turned and walked away. Half the people left after him. 13 remained. He looked at those who remained. 13 people. A young guy, a boy, an old man with a hoe, 2 farmers, and 8. Those who didn't left, not because that they believe, because that work is finished. He nodded to them. Tomorrow, morning, dig. They went their separate ways. He was left alone on edge of the canal. The map glowed in twilight. He enlarged the area around the hill. He examined the terrain. I counted in my head. 13 people. 400 meters of depth. Per meter of depth per the length. This is 422 cubic meters. 13 people per cubic meter per day per person. 323 days. At him 142. They. It doesn't add up. Again, doesn't up. He needs 30 people at a minimum. There has 13. He sat on edge until darkness. The red sun went beyond the horizon last. The sky turned black with a purple hue. The stars here were strangers, not a single familiar picture. It had stopped searching. He didn't know the stars. He was thinking about that. How get 17? 17 people. Trying to persuade is useless. There him no authority. He eloquence. No, even proper language. It a stranger with a stick who digs the ground and mumbles about the great water. Half the village believes him, harmless, silly fellow. The other half considers it helpful, silly, a fool who digs a canal for rainwater. Let dig. But silly, who demands people to rescue from flood which will happen. This is arrogance. He lay under the canopy and closed his eyes. The glowed through his eyelids. Just always. In the morning, he didn't go to the canal. He went to the man's with a cart. He was standing by the fence and was a section of the fence. He approached. The man looked at him. To that point, by them, had an established relationships. Not friendship, not enmity. Something sort of a mutual tacit acknowledgement. The man gave him tools. He was the man's things. For 8 weeks, he repaired the cart twice. The axle again. The loop on the door barn. The gutter from the roof. Each time without being asked. I saw the breakdown. I went over. I fixed it. Left. 11 years of habit. Broken needs. This is up for debate. He showed at the fence. He looked at the problem. The pole cracked in the man it was attached. The man tried to tie it with a rope. He shook his head. He started the axe that the man had left in the same place by the barn. Chopped down a piece of a branch. He split it lengthwise. It made a splint. He placed it against the crack on both sides. He tied it down. The pole stood straight, stronger than before. The man watched. Then he spoke a word. He already knew that word. Good, he nodded. Then he said why he had come, slowly, choosing each word carefully. I need people. The canal is shallow. The water will be high. 13 isn't enough. We need more. You know people. The man listened. His face didn't change. Then he answered, long and fast. He got the gist. There are no people. Everyone's in the fields. Harvest in 2 months. No one will abandon the fields. If there's no harvest, winter will kill more than any flood. He understood. It wasn't an excuse. It was the truth. A village of 200 people lives off the land. Every pair of hands counts. Every day in the fields means food in winter. Taking people from the fields is dooming the village to starvation. Even if the flood is real, starvation is more real. He faced a simple equation. The canal needed to be deepened. That required people. The people were busy. If he took the people away, the village wouldn't survive the winter. If he didn't take them away, the village wouldn't survive the flood. He walked away from the man and worked in the canal all day. He dug in silence. He thought. By evening, he had a decision. Not a good one. The only one. He wouldn't deepen the entire canal. He would build a dam. Not in place of the canal, in addition to it. An earthen embankment on the eastern slope of the hill, higher than the canal, between the village and the river. If the water overflowed the canal in the middle section, it would hit the dam. The dam would hold back the flow. It won't stop it. It will hold it back, slow it down, give the water time to flow further down the canal. It's not an ideal solution. A dam made of earth, without stone, without concrete, without rebar, a wall of mud. But a wall of mud 2 meters high and 3 meters thick is 14,000 cubic meters of earth per kilometer of length. Where will he get that much earth? From the canal. He deepens the canal and piles the excavated soil into a mound nearby. 1 action, 2 results. The canal is deeper, the dam is higher. Every cubic meter from the canal is a cubic meter for the dam. 13 men. They dig out the earth. They pile it into the embankment. They tamp it down. Double the work from a single action. He's calculated it. 13 men. 1 cubic meter per day per person. Half goes toward deepening the canal. Half goes to the embankment. Over 142 days, that's roughly 900 cubic meters into the canal and 900 into the embankment. The channel will be deepened by 1 meter over a stretch of 600 meters. Not along the entire length, but along the critical section, the middle section, where the water will overflow first. The dam will run along this section, 600 meters, 1 meter high, 1.5 meters thick. It's not a fortress. It's a sandcastle facing the ocean. But a sandcastle slows the wave, for seconds, and those seconds give the water time to flow into the channel. He explained the plan to the 13 remaining men, with his fingers, on the ground, drawing with a stick. The channel, the dam, the water, arrows pointing the way. They watched. A young guy nodded first. The rest followed. Not because they understood the hydrodynamics, because the plan meant the same work as before, digging. Only now, instead of throwing the dirt away, they'd pile it up into a wall. The next morning they started. He marked out the line of the dam with stakes and ropes, parallel to the channel, 30 meters up the slope, between the village and the water. The first day yielded 12 meters of a knee-high embankment. By the end of the first week, The embankment stretched 70 meters and had grown to waist height. Soil from the canal was hauled up in baskets and buckets, dumped along the line, tamped down with feet, layer by layer. Clay, stones. Clay, stones. He remembered how a screed is laid. Layers, tamping, reinforcement. He didn't have rebar, but he had willow rods, those very same woven shields used to reinforce the canal walls. He began inserting them into the dam, horizontally, every 30 centimeters. The rods bound the clay together and kept it from spreading. Improvised reinforcement. He didn't know if it would work during a real flood. No one knew. It was impossible to test in advance. All he could do was build it and hope. On the 91st day, a merchant arrived in the village, the same one with the cart. He brought salt and cloth once a month. The merchant stopped on the road and stared at the canal for a long time. Then at the dam. Then at the people hauling earth. He asked the man with the hoe something. The man was standing nearby. He wasn't working on the canal, but he was watching. The man answered. The merchant laughed. Then he looked at the canal again. He stopped laughing. In the evening, the merchant left. He took with him the story of a village where a crazy stranger had dug a 2-kilometer-long canal and was building a wall of mud because he believed in a great flood. In a week, the 3 nearest villages would know about it. In 2 weeks, 6. In a world without the internet, rumors travel at the speed of a cart. Slowly, but unstoppably. He didn't know that. He wasn't thinking about the merchant. He was thinking about the dam and the canal and the 120 days he had left. 120 days. 4 months. The canal is 1,800 meters long. The dam is 70 meters high. He needs 600. 13 pairs of hands. He did the math every night, and every night the numbers didn't add up. He fell asleep with the map before his eyes. The blue marker pulsed steadily and indifferently. It didn't care whether he was ready or not. The water would come on schedule. 8:11. At 98th day, we, the strangers. 3 men from the road. He saw them from the hill. We were on foot, without a cart, without cattle. Backpacks on shoulders and sticks in hands. They stopped at edge the canal and stared, looked down. Then we to the village. He went from the dam and caught them at the well. 3 men, young men, 25 or 30, tanned, hands of laborers. One spoke up, quickly and loudly. He caught a word. They from the village for 2 days' journey to south. We heard about the canal. We've heard about the person who says that there will water. He listened. The man continued. Their village is in the valley by river. If the water will, their house flood first. They came to look. He led them to the canal. He showed them. 800 meters. Depth at first section, 2 and end in a meters. The walls have been reinforced. The dam along the middle section, 20 meters, height to chest. They walked along the canal and were silent. One touched the walls. The other went down and walked down the bottom. The third stood on top and looked at the line of the dam stretching toward south. Then they asked a question. That one. Where do you know? He replied like, as the blacksmith. He showed at the sky, to the at-head. I know. I just know. They exchanged a glance. One shook his head. The other said something to the third. The third remained silent. Then the third spoke up, quietly and briefly. He understood, didn't understand, but he understood the main thing. If true, what to do. He showed on channel, then at shovel, then on them. Dig. They stayed. 3 new workers, 16 in the canal, through 3 days more, 2, from another village. 4. The merchant made his job better than could have do any preacher. He did convincing. He told stories. And people who live by river, and every spring, they see how the water can hear such stories. They came not because they believed the stranger. They came because they were afraid the river. The river was for them not abstraction. The river was a neighbor who every year floods vegetable gardens. And if someone says that in this time it was worse, and with ve dug a lube in 2 kilometers, so maybe be listen. To the day on the channel, they 28 people. Of them, 12 are newcomers. 12 people of 4 different villages. He didn't expected this. He was getting ready to work with 13. 2028 changed everything. The dam grew. 200 meters. The height, 1.5 meters. Thickness, 2. Willow shields inside every 30 centimeters. On the outside, the clay tamped to stone density. The veil was deepened at the same time. The middle section reached to 2 meters. He redistributed people. 12 to the dam, 10 to the canal, 6 to fortifications, the walls, and preparing willow shields. Rotation every 3 hours. Fewer got tired. The quality work did not decline as evening. He had this on rooftops. 4 hours without a break, in heat and hands stop obey. 3 hours of rest and you keep up all day. The visitors brought with them nothing, only their hands. They brought information. The guy from the southern village told that the river in this year is strangely. The water is higher, usual for this season. The elderly say that this was 30 years ago. Back then, flooded 3 villages. A woman from the eastern village told that in the mountains, to thee, all winter, it snow, more than usual. In the spring, it will back to melt. The water will flow into rivers. Every bit of information confirmed the map. It didn't say them about the map. He told that he feels, what he knows, what he sees in the signs. They accepted it. In a world with 2 suns, where there is no meteorology and no science, a man who can sense water is no stranger than a man who can feel rain coming through his aching knees. On the 115th day, he encountered a problem he hadn't expected for the first time. Food. 28 mouths on the canal and the dam. Each worked 9 hours. Physical labor. Calories. The woman with the porridge could no longer manage alone. 2 others joined her. They cooked for the whole crew. But the food came from the village's supplies, and the village began to notice. A man with a hoe came to him on the dam in the evening. He stood at the top and looked down. His face was stern. He spoke, slowly, so the stranger would understand. Strangers are eating our food. Newcomers. 12 mouths. They eat, and the village grows poorer. The harvest hasn't been gathered yet. The supplies are dwindling. If this continues, there will be nothing to eat by winter. He listened. The man was right. The 12 newcomers were eating the village's food and giving nothing in return. They were digging the canal. But the canal doesn't feed anyone. Not yet. He thought about it for 2 days. Then he gathered the newcomers in the evening. He said simply, "Tomorrow, half of you won't be digging. Half of you will go to the fields, to help the villagers. They came here to eat the villagers' food, so they'll work in the villagers' fields. 3 days on the canal, 3 days in the fields, in turns. 6 on the canal, 6 in the fields." The newcomers weren't happy. One said he'd come to dig, not to plow. He looked at him. He said briefly, "Whoever eats, works, wherever they tell you." The guy fell silent. The next day, 6 of the newcomers went out to the fields. The villagers looked at them with suspicion, then with surprise, then with cautious approval. 6 pairs of hands in the fields are 6 pairs of hands. It doesn't matter whose. A week later, the man with the hoe stopped coming to complain. The balance was restored. The canal grew more slowly, but the village stopped starving and stopped being angry. That was the first lesson in governance he learned in this world. People tolerate a stranger as long as he doesn't touch their food. Touch the food, and you're the enemy. Restore the balance, and you're a useful fool again. On the 120th day, he did the thing he'd been thinking about since the first week. He went to the village elder. The elder lived in the biggest house at the top of the hill. 2 stories, stone first floor, wooden second, a tiled roof. The only tiled roof in the village. He hadn't seen the village elder once in all those weeks. The old man didn't leave the house, didn't come to the canal, didn't show up on the road. He existed behind his fence and behind his gate, and the village revolved around him like a wheel revolves around an axis that can't be seen. He knocked on the gate. A woman opened it, an old woman, thin, with a face like a baked apple. She said one word. He understood. What was needed. He said he wanted to speak with the village elder. The woman closed the gate. He waited. 10 minutes later, the gate opened again. The woman nodded. Come in. The village elder was sitting in a room on the ground floor, at a table. In front of him stood a clay mug and lay a piece of bread. He was old, very old. His face was wrinkled like cracked earth. His eyes were small and sharp. He stared at the newcomer without blinking. He didn't stand up. He didn't say hello. He just stared. He stood before the village elder, and for the first time in 3.5 months, felt that everything depended on this conversation. He began to speak. By this point, he knew about 200 words, not fluent speech, but enough to explain simple things. He spoke slowly. The water is coming, in 4 moons. The river will burst its banks. The valley will be flooded. People will flee. They will come here, to the hill, because the hill is the only high ground. Many people, 200, 300, maybe more. The village isn't ready. We need food. We need water. We need houses. We need space. He fell silent. The village elder chewed bread, slowly, methodically, like a man who is in no hurry and has no intention of hurrying. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet and dry, like the rustle of sand on stone. He spoke for a long time, about 5 minutes. He understood maybe half of it, but half was enough. The village elder said he knew about the canal. He knows about the dam. He knows about the newcomers. He knows about the food. He knows everything that happens in his village because it is his village, and nothing happens there without his knowledge. He let the stranger dig because the canal is useful. He let the newcomers stay because they work in the fields. But he doesn't believe in the Great Flood. No one believes in it. And if a stranger came asking for people or food or land for construction, he would get nothing. He listened. He didn't argue. When the village elder finished, he said one sentence. When the water comes and people flee, they will come here. Are you ready for that? The village elder looked at him. A long look. Then he said one word. If. If the water comes. He nodded. If. And left. The conversation with the village elder yielded nothing. No people, no resources, no permission. But it yielded something else. Information. The village elder is not an enemy. The village elder is an observer. He allows. He doesn't help, but he doesn't interfere either. For now. That means the canal and the dam can grow. The newcomers can stay. The food balance is maintained by crop rotation in the fields. All of this works as long as it doesn't disrupt the village's order, as long as he's a useful fool and not a threat. He returned to the canal and worked until dark. On the 130th day, the dam reached 400 meters, 2 meters high in the main section, 2.5 meters thick. Willow shields on the inside, tamped clay on the outside. The canal has been deepened to 2 meters over a stretch of 1,200 meters out of 1,800. The remaining 600 meters were still shallow, 1.5 meters, 31 workers. 3 new ones came from the west, from across the river. They said that on the west bank there were rumors about a man on a hill who knew the future. The rumors had grown with details. He supposedly came from the sky. Supposedly, he speaks with the spirits of the earth. Supposedly, his channel glows at night. None of this was true, But rumors worked better than the truth. They brought people. On the 135th day, he began building warehouses. Not for grain, for people. The flood will come, and with it will come refugees. Wet, hungry, homeless. They needed somewhere to sleep. He couldn't build houses. There wouldn't be enough time. Not enough materials. Not enough hands. But he could build shelters. Long, open shelters on posts with roofs of straw and reeds. Shelter from the rain. Not a house, but shelter. He put 4 men to work preparing the posts. The grove on the western slope. Thin, straight trunks. Strip them of branches. Dig them in 2 rows. Cross them with beams. Fill them with straw. 1 shelter a day, each for 20 people. 10 shelters in 10 days. 200 places. The villagers looked at the shelters and didn't understand. Why build empty roofs? He didn't explain. Explaining was useless. In 3 months, they would understand. On the 142nd day, the blacksmith came. Not to his home. To him on the embankment. The blacksmith stood at the top of the embankment and looked at the canal. Then at the shelters at the foot of the hill. Then at the people. Then he turned to him. He said 1 sentence. I'll make you shovels. 10. He froze. The blacksmith looked at him calmly. No smile, no grandstanding. A business proposal. You're building something big. You need tools. I make tools. He nodded. Then he asked, what do you want in return? The blacksmith didn't answer right away. He thought. Then he said, when the water comes and the people arrive, I'll need coal. Lots of coal. I'm a blacksmith. Without coal, I'm nothing. If the people come, find among them those who know where to get coal. He held out his hand. The blacksmith looked at it. A handshake, a gesture that might be universal, or might be meaningless in a foreign world. The blacksmith took his hand and squeezed it, firmly, briefly, a single movement. The first agreement, the first deal, not based on trust, not based on fear, on mutual benefit. The blacksmith needs coal. He needs shovels, a catastrophe as a business opportunity. He thought about this that evening. The blacksmith was the first to treat the flood not as a prophecy and not as madness, but as a business plan. If the water comes and people come and they have resources, then preparing for it is profitable. Not a matter of faith, a matter of a bet. The blacksmith bet 10 shovels that the flood would come. If it came, he would get coal and customers. If it didn't, he would lose 10 shovels. An acceptable risk. 5 days later, the blacksmith brought the first 3. Iron blades on oak handles. Heavy. Sturdy. Real tools. He handed them out to the 3 best diggers. The pace on the canal picked up. On the 150th day, something happened that changed everything. He was standing on the embankment in the morning. The red sun had just risen above the horizon. The white one stood at its zenith. Double light, sharp shadows. And he saw a group of people on the road coming from the east. Not 3, not 5, more than 20. Men, women, children, livestock, carts. They were walking in a column, slowly, wearily. He came down from the levee and walked toward them. They were villagers from the east bank of the river, 26 people, 3 families. They had left their homes, taken everything they could, livestock, grain, tools, clothes. They came to the hill. He met them on the road. The oldest man spoke. His voice was tired and hoarse. The river had risen, 2 fists higher than usual. The old folks say nothing like this has happened in 40 years. They're afraid. They heard about the man on the hill. They came. He listened and felt something tighten in his chest. They came. Not because he called them, not because he convinced them. They came because the river had risen, and they were afraid. Fear brought them here, not him. He led them to the shelters, empty shelters that the villagers considered a whim. 26 people went under the roofs. They laid out their belongings. They tied up their livestock. The children sat on the ground and looked around with wide eyes. He stood and watched them, the first refugees. 3 months before the flood. The shelters were built in time. The village elder arrived an hour later. He stood at the edge and looked at the newcomers under the shelters. His face was stony. He approached the village elder. He spoke quietly. "They brought grain and livestock. They will work, in the fields and on the canal. They are not a burden, they are a resource." The village elder looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "More will come." He nodded. "Yes, more will come. Many." The village elder turned and left. He didn't say yes or no. He didn't give permission or forbid it. He just walked away. But he uttered the word more. That means he's thinking about what will happen next. That means somewhere deep inside that dry old skull, a thought stirred. Maybe the stranger isn't crazy. Maybe we need to prepare. On the 156th day, there were 300 of them. 200 natives of the lower region and 100 newcomers. 100 new mouths to feed. 100 new pairs of hands. The shelters were full. He built new ones. 3 a day now that he had enough people. The food problem arose again, and more acutely. You can't feed 100 people by rotating them through the fields. The fields aren't made of rubber. The harvest is finite. He thought for 2 days. Then he went to the eastern refugees. He found the elder. He asked directly, "Do you have grain? How much?" The elder replied, 3 carts, wheat and millet, enough for 2 months if we conserve. 2 months. The flood is in 2.5. Not enough. He went to the next family of newcomers, to the 3rd, to the 4th. He counted the supplies. Grain, dried meat, root vegetables, beans. He tallied the total. If he combined the supplies of all the newcomers and added what the village provided, it would last 3 months. 3 months is the flood plus 2 weeks. Just barely. But after the flood, more people would come. Hundreds. Without food, without anything. And then 3 months' worth of supplies would turn into 3 weeks. He needed a plan. He found it on the map. 40 kilometers south of the hill was a marker. Not a disaster. A geographical landmark. A lake. A big one. The map showed it as a green spot with a blue center. Fish. If there were fish in the lake, and lakes with fish were green on the map, he was almost certain. So 40 kilometers south, and fish. Protein. Food that didn't need to be planted and waited on for 6 months. He sent 4 men south, reconnaissance. 2 locals who knew the way and 2 newcomers. 4 days later, they returned. There is a lake. There are fish. Lots of them. The shores are gentle. Forest all around. Game. Mushrooms. Berries. He sent 10 men there. With nets they'd woven in 2 days from ropes and willow twigs. Rough nets. Clumsy. But the fish in the lake had never seen nets and didn't know they needed to swim away from them. A week later, the first batch of fish arrived on the hill, dried and salted. Salt from the merchant. He paid him with labor. 5 of the newcomers repaired the merchant's cart and loaded the goods for 3 days. The merchant left a sack of salt. The fish changed everything. The fish meant he could feed people without touching the grain. Grain for the winter, fish for now. He set up a supply chain. 10 fishermen on the lake. Every 5 days, a wagon load of fish to the hill. Drying, salting, storage in one of the sheds converted into a warehouse. On the 165th day, for the first time in 5 months, he stopped and looked at what he had built. A canal 1,800 meters long, dug to a depth of 2 meters along its entire length. A dam 520 meters long, 2 meters high. 2 wells, 14 sheds. A fishing camp on the lake. A warehouse with supplies. 300 people. 100 of them are newcomers. 45 are working on the canal and the dam. 20 in the fields. 10 fishing. 15 building sheds and gathering materials. 10 on maintenance work. This is no longer a village with a crazy outsider. This is a camp. A small, dirty, ragged but organized camp preparing for the onslaught. And he is at the helm. Not because he was chosen, not because he is stronger or smarter or more authoritative, but because he is the only one who knows what to do next. Every day, every minute, every decision. Where to dig, where to build, who to put where, how much food for how many people. Everything went through him. And that was the problem. He's alone. If he gets sick, if he collapses, if he breaks his leg in the canal, everything would stop. He needed people who could make decisions without him. He chose 3. The young guy who arrived first. He knew the canal better than anyone. Every meter, every turn, every weak spot. He became the foreman on the canal, a man from the first wave of Eastern refugees. Calm, level-headed, good with numbers, good at negotiating. He became the supply manager. Food, water, supplies, everything that needed to be stored and distributed. The blacksmith, not in charge of anything, but an advisor. A man you could go to with a question and get an answer without any fuss. The blacksmith wasn't a leader. The blacksmith was an anchor, heavy and immovable. He explained the plan to them, in full, to someone for the first time. The canal, the dam, the sheds, the warehouses, the fish, the refugees. Everything except the map. He didn't show them the map. He couldn't. They listened. They asked questions. He answered. 2 hours. The longest conversation since he came into this world. Toward the end, the young man said, "You know what's going to happen." Not a question, a statement. He remained silent. The young man continued, "It doesn't matter how you know. What matters is that so far, everything you've said has come true. The river rose. People came. The canal is working. That's enough." The blacksmith nodded, with a single, brief movement. Enough. On the 171st day, the rains began. Not a downpour, a light, frequent drizzle that fell without stopping for 3 days. The sky was shrouded in a gray veil. Both suns had disappeared. The temperature dropped. The canal filled with water to 1/3 of its capacity. It flowed steadily and powerfully along its entire length. 2 kilometers of water rushing down into the valley. The dam stood firm, wet and dark. Streams of water ran down it and into the canal. The walls held. The willow shields inside prevented the clay from spreading. He stood on the dam in the rain and watched. This was the second test. The first rain on the 30th day had been light. This one was more serious. 3 days of continuous rain. The canal was holding up. The dam was holding up. But he saw weak spots. The junction between the old section of the canal and the new, deepened one. The drop in depth. The water swirled at that spot and was eroding the wall. In 2 days, the wall would collapse. He assigned 6 men to repair it, immediately, in the rain. They worked waist-deep in water, reinforcing the wall with a double row of stakes and willow shields. By the evening of the 2nd day, the wall was holding. This rain showed him something else. The villagers came out of their houses and looked at the canal. All of them, for the first time. 200 people stood on the edge of the hill and watched as the water flowed through the canal past their houses, past their fields, past their lives, and into the valley. Not at them, past them. The canal was working, right before their eyes, 3 days in a row. And the man with the hoe who had struck him in the face on the first day stood among them and silently looked down. After the rain, 7 villagers came to him. Men, strong, laborers. They said one word, dig. He gave them shovels. On the 175th day, the number of workers on the canal and the dam had reached 52. The dam grew 20 meters a day. The canal deepened and widened. He began building the second tier, spillways, side canals branching off the main channel. 4 of them, each 200 meters long. They branched off from the main canal at an angle and distributed the water across the lowlands. If the main canal overflowed, the water would flow through the side channels. Not all of it, but enough to reduce the pressure on the walls. He drew this diagram on the ground and explained it to the foreman. The foreman listened. He nodded. He asked questions, the right questions. Where would the water go if the side channel also overflowed? What would happen to the walls if pressure came from both sides? How deep should they dig so the water would flow on its own instead of pooling? The guy thought like an engineer, not because he'd studied it, because he'd been digging for 4 months and had seen how water behaved. Practical experience, the best teacher. On the 180th day, he finished building the dam, 600 meters long, 2 meters high, 2.5 meters thick, reinforced with willow shields, tamped down to the density of stone. He stood at its crest and looked east. Somewhere out there beyond the horizon, the river was gathering strength. The snow in the mountains was melting. The water was rising. The map showed 2 months and 10 days. The marker was pulsing, faster than before, or so it seemed to him. He climbed down from the dam and walked toward the shelters. He checked the supplies. 4 months' worth of grain, enough fish for 2, water from 2 wells, 18 shelters, space for 360 people. 120 were currently occupied. The rest were for those who would come. He sat down on the ground by the warehouse and closed his eyes. For the first time in 6 months, he felt something resembling peace. Not confidence, peace. He had done everything he could. The canal, the dam, the wells, the shelters, the warehouses, food, people, a system. Not perfect, fragile. Built from mud and sticks by the hands of people who, 3 months ago, had been throwing stones at him. But a system, one that works, ready to take the hit. He opened his eyes. The map hung before him, a blue marker, 2 months and 10 days. He had done everything he could, but he didn't know if it would be enough. On the 192nd day, the river rose 4 cubits above normal. He learned this from the merchant. The man arrived pale and silent. The usually talkative merchant this time spoke 3 sentences and left. The bridge on the eastern road is flooded. 2 villages in the lowlands are being evacuated. The water is coming. It's not a flood yet. The map showed that the main surge was a month and 20 days away, but the prelude had already begun. The river was swelling slowly, like a boil, and when it bursts, it will be too late to flee. He gathered 3 men, the young man, the senior storekeeper, the blacksmith. He spoke briefly. A month and 20 days. We need to speed things up. The young man nodded. The blacksmith nodded. The supply officer asked a question. How many people will come? He answered honestly. I don't know. 200? 500? Maybe more. It depends on how many survive and how many make it here. The supply officer was silent for a moment. Then he said, There won't be enough food. He nodded. I know. We'll catch more fish. We'll gather whatever we can. We'll ration. And we'll hope the refugees have at least something with them. Hope. A bad plan, but the only one. On the 195th day, the village elder came to him. Alone, for the first time. The old man stood by the canal and looked at the water. It hadn't rained for a week, but the canal carried water. Groundwater. It seeped through the walls and flowed along the bottom in a thin stream. The canal was alive. The village head turned to him. He said 5 words. What do you want from me? He looked at the old man. At the dry face cracked with wrinkles. At the small, sharp eyes. He had waited 5 months for this question. He answered. People to reinforce the dam. Permission to extend the shelters to the northern slope. And authority. When the refugees arrive, someone has to tell them that there is order and rules here. That someone isn't me. I'm a stranger. They won't listen to me. But they'll listen to you. You're the village head. The old man listened. Then he asked, "Are you sure the water will come?" He could have lied. Could have said absolutely. Could have feigned a confidence he didn't feel. He told the truth. The river has risen 4 cubits. The snow in the mountains is melting. Every sign points to it coming. Am I sure for the rest of my life? No, but I've been digging for 6 months. That's a good enough bet. The village elder looked at him for another 10 seconds. Then he nodded. 10 men at the dam tomorrow morning. He turned and walked toward the village. Slow, stooped, old. But when he entered the village and spoke to the men by the well, they listened. And the next morning, 10 men stood by the dam with shovels. Not outsiders, villagers, native residents of the lower region, for the first time. On the 200th day, he stood on the hilltop and counted. 62 workers. The canal fully deepened and reinforced. A 600-meter dam, 4 side spillways, 2 wells, 22 sheds, a grain warehouse for 5 months, a fish warehouse for 3, 380 people on the hill. Of them, 180 were outsiders. 1 month until the flood. The map pulsed. The blue marker flashed faster. Or perhaps it was just his imagination. He looked east. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the river was rising. A finger's width every day. 2. A palm's width. Unstoppable. He thought about how in a month this plain before him would be underwater. Brown, murky water from horizon to horizon. And somewhere in that water, there would be people, clinging to the wreckage of houses, to trees, to livestock swimming and mooing. And some of them would see the hill, the only dry place, and they would swim toward it, and he had to be ready to take them in. He had to, because the map had given him knowledge, and knowledge is responsibility. Not the kind you choose, the kind that falls on you like a frayed rope on the 12th floor, without warning, without choice, without the chance to say no. He came down from the hill and walked toward the canal, to check, for the 10th time that day, for the 100th time that month, because that's the only thing he knows how to do with a problem. Check, fix, prepare, and wait. 10th day the came. Not that as he expected. Not a wall, not a wave, not roar. It came quietly, at night. He woke up at a sound, not a rumble, a rustle. A low, continuous rustling as if 1,000 snakes crawling through the grass. He crawled from the shed. It dark. The red sun had riz. White on other side of the sky. Only stars. Strange, cold stars. And rustle. He stood up onto the dam. He looked toward east, and saw. The plain glistened. All of it. From the horizon to the foot the hill. A thin layer of water covered the ground like a film. Grass stuck out from it in tufts. Water was rising, slowly, millimeter per minute, without noise, no waves. It just rose, like a bathtub. He watched at it and thought, if the speed is then in 3 hours, that will rise by 10 centimeters, in 6 at 20, through 12 past 40. That is flood. This the beginning, a prelude. The main blow will later, when the river breaks its banks for real. He went from the dam and ran toward the village. He knocked on the door. He shouted one word. Water, water, water. People were sleepy and angry. Then we watched toward east, and woke up instantly. At dawn the village stood on top the hill. 380 people. They watched toward east. The plain disappeared. The water covered it completely. The road to east has underwater. The fields on the lower slope were flooded. The grass had disappeared. Only the tops of the bushes and the tree crowns remained. The canal was functioning. Water entered it from the eastern edge and flowed along the channel toward the southeast, toward the depression. But there was too much water. The canal took a portion of it, perhaps a quarter of the flow. The rest flowed past, across the surface, along the dam. The dam held. The water hit it and turned. It flowed along the embankment and drained into the side spillways. The system was working. Not perfectly. The lower shelters were flooded. The water came up to the ankles. People were hauling their belongings higher up, but the system was working. The hill stood. The village stood. The water flowed past. He stood on the dam and watched. His hands were shaking. Not from the cold, from the tension. 6 months of work. Every day. Every spike. Every stake. Every willow shield. All for this moment. The canal swallowed the water. The dam held back the rest. The spillways distributed the pressure. The hill held. By noon, the water had risen a meter. The road to the south was gone too. The hill had become an island, 200 by 300 meters of dry land in the middle of brown water. 380 people. Livestock at the top. Grain in dry warehouses. 2 wells with clean water. He walked the dam every hour, looking for cracks, leaks, weak spots. He found one at the western end. Water was seeping through the dam's body, a thin trickle, but the trickle meant a channel inside. A channel inside meant erosion. Erosion meant a breach. He stationed 6 men, bags of clay, to pack it from the outside, to tamp it down, to press it. The trickle stopped after 2 hours of work. He exhaled. The first problem solved. By evening on the first day, what he had been waiting for and fearing began. Dots appeared on the horizon. People. In the water. They were wading waist-deep in murky brown water. Dozens. Then hundreds. They were heading toward the hill. The only dry spot visible from the plain. The first ones reached it at sunset. Wet, dirty, shivering. Women carrying children in their arms. Men with bundles on their heads. Old people being led by the arms. They emerged from the water onto the hillside and collapsed to the ground, exhausted, speechless. He met them, directed them to the shelters, to the water, to the food. Porridge from a communal pot, fish, bread, blankets, the few that were available. 170 people arrived on the first night. By the morning of the second day, 300. By evening, 420. The shelters were overflowing. People sat on the ground under the open sky, huddled together. Children cried. Women were silent. Men stared with empty eyes at the water that had taken their homes. He hadn't slept for 2 days. He walked from shelter to shelter. He checked the dam. He counted the people. He distributed food. He sent the sick to the women who knew how to treat them. He sent the healthy ones to the dam. The water was rising, slowly but steadily. By the third day, the level had risen by 1.5 meters. The canal was running at full capacity. It roared. The water rushed along it so fast that small stones flew across the bottom like bullets. The dam stood, wet and black. The water pressed against it from the outside. Inside, the clay held. The willow shields kept it from spreading. He walked along the dam and listened. The clay creaked, under pressure, like teeth clenched too tightly. It held, but it creaked. On the 4th day, the water stopped. The level froze at 7 feet, 20 centimeters from the edge of the dam, 20 centimeters between order and chaos. He stood on the dam and looked at those 20 centimeters. 1.5 years. If he had started 2 weeks later, if he hadn't deepened the middle section, if he hadn't built the side spillways, if the blacksmith hadn't given him wedges and the man with the cart hadn't given him a shovel, if the woman hadn't brought the first bowl of porridge. 20 centimeters, built from 1,000 small decisions and 1,000 small actions over 6 months. On the 5th day, the water began to recede, slowly, 1 centimeter per hour. The river was returning to its banks. The plain was exposed, dirty, covered in silt and debris, dead livestock, ruins of houses, uprooted trees. He looked at it and thought of those who hadn't made it, of the dots he'd seen in the water that hadn't moved. On the 7th day, the water was gone. The canal carried the last streams into the lowlands. The dam stood, wet and sagging, but intact. The hill stood. 812 people now lived on it. 812. There had been 200. Now there were 800. 600 refugees in 7 days. He had supplies for 380. He looked at the map. The blue marker had faded. The first disaster was over. The next marker, brown, earthquake, south, in 6 months. He stood on the dam he'd spent 6 months building. Around him were 800 people he had nothing to feed. Behind him was the hill that had become an island and was now a camp. Before him lay a plain covered in silt where strangers' lives lay buried. And the map before his eyes. Next marker, 6 months. He clenched his fists, unclenched them, looked at his hands. Calluses, scars, cracked skin. The hands of an air-conditioning technician who had been digging the earth for 6 months. He turned and walked down, toward the people. We need to take stock. We need to count the people. We need to assess their skills. Among the 600 refugees are carpenters and blacksmiths and farmers and fishermen. We need to find each one. We need to put each one in their place. Because 6 months isn't enough. And next time, the earth will shake. And you can't prepare a canal for that. On 8th day after the flood, he stood by the warehouse and counting bags. 12 bags of grain, 8 bags of fish, 4 baskets of root vegetables, 6 bundles of beans, 812 people. He counted in his head. If we ration strictly, porridge in the morning, fish in the evening, no extras, no snacks. At 16 days, then nothing. He closed his and stood like that for a minute, then opened and went to the sheds. The refugees sat in groups, in families, in villages. Each group stuck to their own. He was looking specific people, the of age from An village, farmer, hands like shovels, wife and 2 children. He approached. He asked, "You sow wheat?" The man nodded. All life. He asked further. The plain was flooded, silt in fields. You can't to sow in mud. The man looked at him as a fool. Then he started thinking. Ore is good. Ore is fertile layer. The carries with the rich soil. After the flood, the land will yield twice as much, if there is grain for sowing. He nodded. There, a little. 3 bags he set aside. Not food, for crops. The farmer looked at him with eyes. You knew that their flood. You saved grain for planting. You planned this. He didn't answer. He at the plain, when it's to sow. The farmer stepped from the shed. He walked toward the edge of the hill. I looked down. The ground glistened with moisture. Mud lay in an even layer. After a week, it will dry. You can plow. In 10 days, sow. Harvest in 4 months. 4 months. In has of enough 16 days. Between the 16 days and 4 months had been a chasm. It must do fill. Fish, the lake to south. The only source of food that does depends on the season. It has doubled the number of fishermen. 20 people, he sent immediately, with new networks. The blacksmith forged hooks, real iron hooks, 12 pieces, small change, but a trifle that catches fish. Then he walked all sheds. All 22. I was talking with people. Not with everyone. With those who looked like a nice with skills. Strong hands, confident gaze, tools that they pulled from water and brought with them. Carpenter from the village. Privalok with him, and a set chisels wrapped in oiled cloth. I have preserved during flood, held to chest as walked across waist in water. A man who rescuing tools when is his house it. Man who knows the value of work. Potter from river village. Old, 60 years. Hands twisted from clay. He came with anything but his hands that his tool. Clay around. Take and sculpt. Pots, bowls, mugs, pipes, bricks. Healer. Woman years 40. A skinny and muscular, with a bag dried herbs. The only thing she saved. Herbs and knowledge. In camp there 800 people without a single doctor. Healer with herbs this a treasure. 2 bricklayers from a foothill village. Brothers, both broad-shouldered and silent. They were from stone, their walls, foundations, ovens. Stone around the hill is there. After the flood, the river carried to the surface boulders and pebbles. Take and build, he recorded. Don't on paper. Paper was in head. Carpenter, potter, healer. 2 bricklayers, 3 farmers, 4 fishermen with experience, leather worker, weaver, 2 shepherds without cattle, 1 former soldier. Each person is skill. Every skill is resource. The flood killed the village, but did not kill professions. People came from the date that at them in hands and in minds, and this more than any bag of grain. On 9th day, he gathered everyone at top the hill, 812 person, for the first time. He stood on a rock by the well. The village head stood beside him. He was silent, but stood beside me. That was important. The stranger speaks. The village elder confirms with his presence. He spoke slowly. 5 months ago, his vocabulary was 40 words. Now about 500. Not free speech, but enough to be understood. The water is gone. We are alive. The hill is still standing, but winter. And there are 800. There is scarce. They're little. I need work. That's all. Every day. Whoever can catch fish will to lake. Who knows plow will go to the field. Who knows set up will build. Who doesn't knows do will learn. He stopped. He looked at faces. 800 faces. Tired. Frightened. Lost. People of who a week were at home in the fields and lives, and now there is only a shed and a bowl of porridge. He continued. I knew that water would come. I was getting ready. You saw. The canal. The dam. Canopies. Food. I knew. And I know something else. Silence. Absolute. 800 people and not sound. 6 moons the earth will shake. In south. Far from here. Us won't affected. But people from there will run away. And will come here. Just you came. We will more. Much more. And we must be ready. He fell silent. The silence lasted 10 seconds. 20. Then the voice from a crowd. A man's. Rough. Where do you know? That exact question. He answered as always. I know. Just as I knew about the water. Silence again. Then another voice. A woman's. Quiet. He spoke of water. The water has come. He speaks of the earth. The earth will shake. A murmur ran through the crowd, like wind through the grass. He didn't interfere. Let them talk. Let them discuss. Let them believe or not believe. The main thing has been said. The seed has been sown. Not in the ground, in their heads. In a week, they'll start working, not because he tells them to, but because they'll be afraid of the next blow. Fear is fuel, bad fuel, dirty and stinking, but the only one that works when there's nothing else. On the 10th day after the flood, work began. Not the kind of work they used to do. Before, he built defenses against the water. Now he was building a city. Not a city in the full sense, a camp, but a camp that had to survive the winter. The carpenter was given 10 assistants and a task. Long barracks, a frame of tree trunks, walls of woven willow covered in clay, a roof of reeds. Each barrack held 40 people, cramped, but warm. Not just a shelter, walls, a roof, a floor. The masons were given a different task. Ovens, large communal ovens for cooking, stone and clay. 3 ovens for the camp's 3 sectors, each serving 250 people. The potter was given clay and 2 apprentices, tableware, storage pots, food bowls, water jugs, drainage pipes. Every item he made from clay was an item that didn't need to be sought out, bought, or traded for. The herbalist was given a shelter, and permission to gather herbs on the plain. After the flood, the plain turned green at a maddening pace. The silt fertilized the soil. Grass shot up from the ground like crazy. And along with the grass came the plants the healer had been waiting for. Medicinal, poisonous, useful. She knew each one by name and by scent. The farmers went out into the fields 11 days later. The silt had dried. The soil had become soft and rich. They plowed it with wooden plows that a carpenter had whacked together in 2 days. They dragged them by hand. There were no horses. 3 oxen for the entire camp. 4 men at a time harnessed themselves and dragged the plow across the field. Hard, slow, but the furrows lay straight. The grain fell into the rich, black soil. He stood at the edge of the field and watched. 3 sacks of grain, sown. If the harvest is good, each sack will yield 5. 15 sacks. For 800 people for the whole winter. Not much. But with the fish and what they gather in the forest and on the plain, it might be enough. Maybe. He hated that word. Maybe. His entire plan was built on maybe. Maybe there would be enough food. Maybe the dam would hold through the winter. Maybe the wells wouldn't freeze. Maybe people wouldn't start killing each other over a bowl of porridge. But maybe that's all a man has when he's building a city out of mud in the middle of a foreign world. On the 20th day after the flood, he faced his first conflict. Not a minor one, a real one. A group of refugees from an eastern village. 23 people. Men, women, children. Their leader came to him in the morning, a sturdy man with a scar across his left cheek. He spoke plainly. "We're leaving. We'll take our share of food and leave." He asked where. "To the east. Back. The water's gone. Our lands are there. We'll rebuild." He looked at the man. Then he said, "In 6 moons, the earth will shake in the south. A landslide will block the western river. Your stream will dry up. A year after that, there will be a drought. If you leave, you'll rebuild the village. And in a year, it will die of thirst." The man looked at him. The scar stood out white against his tanned cheek. He didn't believe him. "You predicted the water. Fine. The water came. But now you're talking about an earthquake and a drought. Something new every time. Every time a reason to stay. Convenient." He didn't get angry. The man was right. From the outside, that's exactly how it looked. Convenient. A new disaster every time. Stay every time. Work for me every time. He said, "It's your right. Leave. You'll get food for a 3-day journey. A fair share." The man blinked. He'd expected an argument. Threats, pleas, disagreement. He asked again, "You won't stop us?" He shook his head. "No. You're a free man. Your family. Your choice." I said, "I know. You decide what to do with that knowledge." The man stood before him and said nothing. 10 seconds. 20. Then he turned and walked away. The next morning, 23 people set off eastward, with food for 3 days. He gave them what he had promised, a little more, because there were 4 children among them. The other refugees watched them go. He saw their faces, doubt, fear, a desire to leave too, to go home, to rebuild, to forget. He said nothing. Didn't try to talk them out of it, didn't scare them. Just stood there and watched as 23 people walked down the muddy road to the east. 23 minus 789. In the evening, a young guy came to him, the senior guy from the channel. He said quietly, 3 more want to leave, tomorrow. He nodded. Let them. The guy looked at him. If everyone leaves, we won't survive the winter. We need hands, every pair of hands. He replied, if I keep people here by force, this isn't a camp. It's a prison. People run away from prisons. People don't leave a camp that feeds and protects them. Make it so that it's better here than there, and they'll stay. The guy thought about it. Then he nodded. 3 left the next day, then 4 more. Then it stopped. No one else left. 782 people. Enough. It has to be enough. On the 30th day after the first barrack was ready, long, 20 meters, the walls made woven willow coated with law in 2 layers, roof made of reeds laid with a thickness at least a palm, the good apprentice of earth but tamped and covered dry straw. Along the walls there are planks for sleep, by 20 per each side. In the middle is a passageway. At end is a stove, stone. The bricklayer brothers built it in 2 days. The Go made clay tubes, which the potter fired all week. The kiln smoked, the draught was poor. But it was no, and on it could cook with cook on it. 40 people drove into barracks, into that very bare that. He stood at the entrance and listened. Inside they were talking. They were laughing. Someone was swearing over a seat. A child was crying. Ordinary sounds. Sounds of a break under the roof. Not under a canopy. Under roof. He nodded to the carpenter. All right, next. 250th day after the flood stood 6 barracks. 240 beds under roof. Another 4 at progress. The carpenter turned out not just a carpenter. He turned out to be a foreman. A man who knew organize 10 inexperienced workers in such a way that they do the work of 5 skilled workers. Each barracks was built faster than the previous one. The first 10 days, the second 8, third 6. To the 6th, they were by 4 days. Conveyor belt. One crew chops and drags logs. The second erects the frame. The third weaves the walls. The fourth applies with clay. The fifth covers the roof. Each knows her job. Each begins when the previous one has finished her section. He didn't come up with this assembly line. The carpenter did. He simply saw it and approved, and thought that the carpenter was worth 10 diggers. Along with the barracks, other work was underway. The dam needed to be repaired. The flood hadn't destroyed it, but it had damaged it. The western section had subsided by 1/2 meter. The eastern section was eroded on the outer side. There were 3 cracks in the embankment's body in the middle section. He assigned 20 men to the repairs. New people. Refugees who hadn't worked yet. Some of them were holding a shovel for the first time in their lives. Townspeople. From the eastern trading town that stood on the riverbank and is no more. Merchants, scribes, servants. People whose hands were used to pens and scales, not shovels and hoes. They dug slowly and poorly, but they dug, because the alternative was to sit under a canopy and wait, and there was nothing to wait for. Among the townspeople, he found a man he hadn't expected, an accountant, a man of about 35, thin, with a sharp face and quick eyes. He knew how to count, not on his fingers, on an abacus, a wooden frame with beads that he had carried out of the flood in a sack along with 3 scrolls of parchment and writing sticks. A man saves counting tools and parchment from the flood, just as a carpenter saves his chisels. Everyone saves what they live by. He sat the accountant down next to him and began to dictate. For the first time in 7 months, he could write down what he had been keeping in his head. People. 782. Of them, 490 able-bodied, 140 children under 12, 80 elderly and sick, women with infants, 72. Supplies: grain for 12 days, fish for 8, beans for 5. Consumption: 400 portions a day minimum, assuming children and the elderly eat half. Production: fishermen provide 40 portions of fish a day. Gathering on the plain yields another 20. Harvest in 3.5 months. Shortfall: 340 portions a day. Every day. 3.5 months. He looked at the figures the accountant had written on the parchment. Neat columns, straight rows, beautiful handwriting, and terrifying numbers. 340 portions a day is 35,000 portions in the 100 days before the harvest. He doesn't have 35,000 portions. He doesn't even have 10,000. He sat and thought. The accountant waited. Then he found the answer. Didn't find it. Found it. He sat by the warehouse and looked out at the plain. The plain was green. Grass. Young. Lush. After the flood, the earth burst with life. Silt. Moisture. The warmth of 2 suns. Perfect conditions. The grass grew so fast that within a week it was knee-high. And in that grass, cattle roamed. Not his cattle. Wild cattle. Herds he had never seen before. They came from the west, from the foothills. Animals resembling cows but smaller, with short horns and thick fur. They grazed on the plain by the dozens, patches of brown fur on the green field. Meat. Not fish. Meat. He found a former soldier, the only person in the camp who knew how to handle a weapon. He asked, "Do you know how to hunt?" The soldier replied briefly, "No, I know how to kill." Close enough. He sent the soldier and 4 strong men out onto the plain, with spears, wooden ones, with iron tips forged by the blacksmith. On the second day, they returned with a carcass, a small animal, 60 kilograms of meat. For 800 people, that's a handful. But a handful of meat every day is protein, calories, life. He organized the hunt. Every day. A group of 5 would set out at dawn. They'd return by noon. 1 carcass a day, sometimes 2. The meat went into the communal pot, the bones for broth, the hides to the tanner. From the hides, he made belts, bags, shoes. Every part of the animal was used. Nothing was thrown away. He recalled documentaries about Native Americans. Who used the entire bison? Bones for needles, tendons for thread, the stomach for a water container. He wasn't a Native American. He was an air conditioning technician. But the principle was the same. Use everything. Throw nothing away. By the 60th day after the flood, the food supply had stabilized. Not good, but stable. Fish, meat, foraging, grain in reserve for the next planting cycle. People ate little. They were losing weight, but they weren't starving. No one had died of hunger. Yet. And at that moment, he began to think about the earthquake. The map showed 5 months. A brown mark in the south, 300 kilometers. Far enough that the hill wouldn't shake, but close enough for the consequences to reach them. Landslides, rivers drying up, and refugees. Refugees again. How many this time? He looked at the map and counted. Southern cities. 3 major settlements in the impact zone. A population of between 1,000 and 3,000 in each. If the destruction is severe, if half survive, if a quarter make it north, between 500 and 2,000 new people. There are already 782 on his hill. Plus 2,000 is almost 3,000. 3,000 people on a hill in the middle of a plain. A city. A real city. He sat under the awning and looked at the map. The white and red suns were setting at the same time. A rare phenomenon. The sky was half gold, half crimson. Beautiful. He didn't notice. He was thinking about 3,000 mouths to feed and where to get 3,000 meals a day. On 70th day after the flood, he made a decision which changed everything. Hill was small, 200 to 300 meters. That was for 200 people. That 782 already cramped. On 3,000, impossible. He needs territory. He rose to the top of the hill, the highest period. I looked around. To north, a marshy floodplain. It's no use. To the east, lowland, where the water. Dangerous. To west, grove, and behind gentle hills stretching toward foothills. To south, the plain gradually rises toward a rocky ridge into 5 kilometers. South and west, 2 sides for expansion. He took out a map. He studied the terrain. The western ridges. The elevation is sufficient. Next flood won't reach it. But before them, 2 kilometers. And between them and the hill, a lowland which can flood. South is better. The land rises gradually. A rocky ridge to south is a natural wall. Between the hill and the ridge, 5 kilometers of gentle climb. Dry, rocky, not fertile, but suitable for construction. He made a decision. The city will grow toward south. From the hill to rocky ridge, 5 kilometers, gradually, a block by lot. The hill will remain the center, the heart, but the city will outgrow it. He gathered his 3, the guy, the accountant, a blacksmith. I laid out a plan. I drew on the ground with a stick. The hill here, a ridge there. Between them is the city, the road to the center. On sides, neighborhoods. Each block, 200 people. 5 blocks to 1,000. 15 per 3,000. Each quarter is 4 barracks. A well, a stove, a storage shed, fence. Off-grid unit that can feed and protect herself. The blacksmith asked, "Why fence?" He replied, "Because that 3,000 people out of 20 different villages and towns. This not a community. It chaos. Every neighborhood will know its own. My food, his water, my work. Fence not from enemies, from confusion." The boy asked, "Who will build people enough to food?" "Where the for construction," he replied. Rotation. 3 days for food, 2 days for construction. Each. No exceptions. Except fishermen. Except hunters. Except those who in fields. Everyone, the rest. 2 days a week on construction. The accountant calculated on the abacus. 490 able-bodied. Minus 100 on food and fields. Minus 20 for fish. Minus 20 for construction barracks on the hill. Minus 5 on hunting. Minus 10 for household chores. That leaves 303 left. That 2 days a week is 130 person days per a week. 1 barrack 4 days by 10 people. That 40 person days. 3 barracks in a week. 12 in 12 o'clock. Quarter of 4 barracks for a month and a half. 5 blocks in 7.5 months. The earthquake in 5. Not enough, he said. 3 blocks beyond 5 months, 600 spots, plus that already on the hill, that 400 seats. If there are 600 people will, without roofs, they will spend the winter in sheds, poor, but they're alive. The guy shook his head. They make it through the winter. In winter it's below freezing, not severe, but at night below freezing. In the shed will freeze. He paused to think. Then he asked, "When winter?" The guy replied, "In 7 moons. The earthquake in 5. 2 months between the earthquake and winter. 2 months of construction barracks for everyone who comes. Plus, those who will come will build themselves. New hands, new people. If there are them, they're builders. If among them, they're people with tools. If. He stood up and went toward South Slope. I marked out the first block, 1 meters to 100. 4 areas for barracks, a place for a well in the center, a spot for the stove, space for storage, drove stakes, I stretched ropes. By evening, the layout of the block was on southern slope. White pegs in rocky soil, strings of ropes between them. Plan on the ground. The future city. The next morning, he brought 100 people, first rotation. They stood in empty rocky slope and looked at pegs. He said, "Dig. Foundation. Trenches for the walls." They dug. The soil here was different. Not clay. Stone with a thin layer soil on top. The shovels clattered against the rock. Slowly. Heavily. But the stone that is digging is the stone that won't be washed away by water. This stone on which stands solid foundation. He realized why the builders in the look a rock for foundation. Not out love for stone, out fear of that a stone will be. The masons came too, second day. They looked at the rock. We exchanged glances. My older brother said, The rock is good, limestone, soft to work, durable for walls. If break, layer by layers, you will get blocks. He breaks them layer by layer. He gave them wedges, those very ones. The blacksmith made 10 more over the past month. The masons began breaking up the rock, methodically, a wedge into a crack, a blow, a chip, a block, a wedge into the next crack, a blow, a chip, a block. By the end of the first week, they had a stack of stone blocks, rough, uneven, but suitable for masonry. The first quarter will be made of stone, not willow and clay, stone. It's slower, heavier, but stronger, and warmer in winter, and it won't burn. A willow barracks burns down in 15 minutes. Stone lasts. He thought about fires because 800 people crammed together with open stoves is a matter of time, not probability. There will be a fire. When, not if. And stone walls will save lives. By the 80th day after the flood, the first foundation of the southern block was ready. The stone blocks were laid in 2 rows. The walls were growing. Slowly. 3 rows a day. But they were growing. He walked among the builders and watched. He didn't give orders. The masons knew their craft better than he did. He was learning from them. How to lay a stone, how to tie the joints, how to make the corners sturdy. Every skill he saw, he memorized. Not because he was going to lay stones himself, because knowledge is a tool, and you can never have too many tools. Exclusive videos, story continuations, and bonus content are already available on Patreon before YouTube, so check the link in the description for early access to all new recaps and continuations.